Hey there, horror movie tea sippers.
The following podcast episode will contain spoilers for the movie we are about to review. If you have not seen the movie and do not wish to have anything ruined prematurely, please do not continue to watch or listen until you have seen the movie.
And welcome to the Horror Movie Tea Podcast. Today we are covering Hellraiser from 1987, but we have a special guest. We have Keith, also known as Bored Now on YouTube, joining us today. He does movie reviews as well as TV series, so hi Keith.
Yeah. Hey Alyssa, hey Jess. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. But before we go into the review, let's grab our cups and talk about tea. So, we always like to let our guests go first. Okay. So what tea are you drinking today?
Okay. I've got a tea from the Good Earth brand from California, which is like a green tea, and it's Moroccan mint.
Oh.
So I'll hold it up there so you can see. I think you... So it's basically like peppermint and various stuff like that. And yeah, said to be dates back to 1970s California. So it says you got no chance of coming out boring if you were born in 70s California, apparently. So that's pretty cool. It sounds pretty cool.
That's a pretty bold claim.
It really is.
I mean, they're not wrong.
So that's what I've gone with.
Cool.
Sounds nice.
Well, I went with the Plum Deluxe Garden Grove Green Tea. It's got green tea, jasmine flowers, rose petals, dried cherries, and vanilla essence. And as we have had to say in the last few episodes, it is an affiliate. But thank you, Plum Deluxe, for allowing us to continue doing what we love.
Yes. And I am also on the mint wavelength here. So I went with Bigelow's Perfectly Mint Tea.
Oh, you always go for that one.
I do. It's one of my favorites. It's just black tea and spearmint. But honestly, like, that's all you need sometimes. Just tea and mint.
It does help with allergies, though.
It does. And my allergies, as you could probably tell, are crazy right now. There's just so much pollen in the air.
Yeah. Yep. But for our tea sippers out there, brew yourself a cup of tea, sit back, relax, and we hope you enjoy the review. So... Hellraiser, specifically from 1987. Don't get confused from the newer one. This is the original, the OG. But it's about this husband and wife move into this house, and the woman discovers that, well, essentially the husband like cuts himself, and the wife later finds in the attic her deceased brother-in-law Frank, who she also cheated with her husband. How do you
cheated on her husband?
Cheated on her husband.
like how do you words? How do you language? And then but anyway, so Frank convinces her that to give him sacrifices so that way he can regenerate. And so he's regenerating, and he gets to a point where where her daughter or stepdaughter, Christy, goes into the attic and finds out about Frank. And so she steals this puzzle box and accidentally unleashes the underworld, pretty much. And she goes to show them Frank, and chaos ensues. But Christy makes it, so that's what's important. But for... Oh man, this this is a lot. So for entertainment, I would rate this one honestly a 7. I will be honest that when I saw this movie years ago and I didn't really appreciate it that much. I kind of thought it was a dud. I'm like, why do people like this movie? But I think, honestly, it's one of those movies that you have to watch multiple times, because whenever I first watched it, I was confused the majority of the time, or as grossed out from the gore, which I guess, trigger warning, there is gore in this movie. But if you didn't know, but I really like the style of this movie. It's dark, but it still leaves you at the end appreciating what you watched. Like you still you feel satisfied at the end. Like you don't feel like upset with how they ended it. But I think it's because like Kirsty, they made a pretty sympathetic character. But the effects of the movie were pretty decent. There were
for the time.
Well, I hate saying that because that seems like back in those days.
But even now, because I think a lot of films are ruined by too much computer generated effects now.
Yeah, like it had decent practical effects. There were a few things like the blood consistency and the skin when the bird's getting pulled, not to be too graphic. But those times it did kind of, you're like, okay, that's a movie. But whenever Frank is not completely regenerated, I felt like a lot of that was pretty realistic. I think a part of the reason why this movie, what makes it kind of scary, is not just the body horror, but the fact that the puzzle box that unleashes like the underworld, it pretty much opens and closes on its own accord. Like the Kirsty, she gets like cursed for no reason. It's like she just grabbed the box and then the box is like, haha, and then and then even whenever she's trying to lock them back in, it's like the box is actively trying to reopen. So it's just, I don't know. It's like that's definitely terrifying. And then I don't know. I was kind of wondering if there's like some level of symbolism where since the wife cheated on her husband, where it's like, oh, skeletons in the closet, but this time it's like, oh, skeletons in the attic. It's kind of like a play on like, keeping secrets from the husband, but then also like the body horror aspect, and then also this element of having a force that you can't control, otherworldly stuff. It's just, and then there's even, I don't know, I felt like there's some, in addition to the body horror, I felt there's some weird BDSM things too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the movie, I was talking with them afterward, it's like, it feels like, it does feel kind of like an early Gothic type of movie where I feel like a lot of outfits in the 90s might have been inspired by some of the clothes. But yeah, it's like, I don't have a whole lot to say because it is a movie that I have to digest a bit. But I did watch it multiple times. This was my second time watching it in a matter of several years. It had been a while. But I definitely, if you haven't watched it, I recommend. I feel like this movie needs maybe a little bit more love.
Give it a 6.5 for entertainment.
Oh.
Like it's decent. It has actually gone up, in my opinion, after a few watches. I saw it probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that, for the first time. And I was very, very confused by what was going on. The gore didn't really bother me because you guys know me, but the just trying to figure out what was a flashback and what was actually happening and who everyone was, because also horrible with names anyway. And it didn't really hit home for me that first watch through. The second watch, I definitely was able to get a lot more of what was going on, and it made a bit more sense, but it still was just kind of okay. And this watch through, it definitely was better. You do get more from it the more times you watch it, and you're able to notice different things. Like, we noticed a mess up.
Of course, they have to bring that up.
I love doing that, though. Like, I love those. So when the monster is coming at Christy in the hospital, if you look down toward the bottom of the screen, you can see that it's on some kind of like rolling cart apparatus. But they never show it again after that. So they realized it later on and fixed that issue. But little things like that, it's kind of cool to notice that after watching it a few times, because I definitely didn't notice it the first couple of watches. It was just this time that I was like, wait a minute. So things like that were pretty good. A lot of the reactions that characters had toward different situations felt fairly realistic. Like when he sliced his hand open and went to find his wife, and she asked him, how deep is it? And he's like, I haven't looked yet.
Looked at it.
Accurate.
Yep.
Great line, great delivery.
Yep. So different things like that felt pretty real and organic and authentic, and it was really nice to see that. There were some things that kind of took away from it, mainly the effects for me. Most of the effects are good. It's just certain things like the body toward the end that dumps out maggots on Christy. And when Frank first gets some blood and starts to regenerate, when he like yells out, I lost it.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
And it kind of takes you out of the movie setting because you're just laughing too hard. So I feel like there are things that could have been stronger with it, but other things that they did pretty well, and it is definitely more of a slow burn kind of a movie. So it could potentially go up in rating down the line with a few more watches, but for now, for me, it's a 6.5.
That's cool. Okay. I can't be too mad then. Solid scores. Okay. So as I was saying before, I've actually read the book, which is by the director, Clive Barker. Hellbound Heart is called. I think that's quite rare to actually adapt your own book and actually direct it. I don't think that happens too often. So that's quite
pretty
cool.
rare.
Yeah, and I think he does a pretty solid job. Just to add to something Alyssa was saying about the SMN kinky stuff, is that comes from Clive Barker himself, because he actually had an interest in that stuff in his own life. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Makes a lot of sense. He actually wanted to put that front and center in the film, and it's sort of freaky, and there's a lot of like allusions to it because the whole idea behind the Cenobites is that they're torn between good and evil, between heaven and hell. And so there's a lot of like metaphor stuff going on with like pleasure and pain.
Yeah.
Which sort of links to that sort of sexual type thing. So
I remember it delves more into it in the later movies.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah, so that's something I liked a lot about the film, how thematic it was. So yeah, this has gone up for me because I already liked it. I'm a big fan. I think it's a cult favorite of mine, and for entertainment, I'm going to give it 9 out of 10. I think this is, for me, it ticks a lot of boxes of what an ideal horror is, like an ideal cult horror, very gothic, like you said. Really cool, practical, like creature design, very sort of fleshy, and they do some creative things with it, which I think can be an advantage of doing it practical as well. Is like up to a point it looks realistic, but also there's room to experiment and, not maybe look too realistic sort of thing. I think it's quite grounded as well, like the premise and the start of it, like the characters. I think it's quite smartly plotted. I quite like how they set up in one scene that Julia is actually not Kirsty's mother, but her stepmother. And then how they return to that later on. The suspense of the movie is she actually going to sacrifice Kirsty, or will she turn on Kirsty? Mm-hmm. And I think it adds to that more because she's not like actually her mother, so you sort of think she's a bit more likely to maybe turn on her later. So I like the overall metaphor with like Julia, how it's almost like even though she's being manipulated and stuff through Frank and stuff, I think they sort of go for this idea that she has like evil in her and she is like an animalistic sort of thing and ruthless. So it's almost like if she didn't have that in her. I think a lot of this movie is about hubris as well. Like with certain characters, there's a lot of ego.
Yeah.
And I sort of like how they play on like the 80s yuppie type theme. So when she's like luring these guys back to the house to feed Frank on, it's almost like, yeah, these are douchey yuppie types, so you can kill them. It's fine. Well, we don't like these people. They're perfect sacrifices, but yeah, there's some good character stuff. There's some believable characters. I think Kirsty's a really good final gal. I think she's very proactive and she stands up to the Cenobites and she actually thinks about things, like the game plan to like throw the box out the window because she'd obviously cottoned on that they can't go outside, and she sort of knew that once she gets outside, she can then get the box. So things like that I really like. So there's a lot of good tension, a lot of good like character stuff. I sort of feel that Larry at times was from a different movie. Because I like the actor, but I feel like he was maybe more comic relief in a way. He was kind of goofy, but I like that actor, so I think he got away with it. But yeah, there's a lot of cool practical effects. It's very atmospheric, and I like the themes, and it kept me guessing as well towards the end, like because I hadn't seen it for a long time, so I was on the edge of my seat. Is Kirsty gonna survive or not? So, and also the ending rocks. The ending is so cool with the dragon. Mild spoiler, but there is a dragon, which you don't get at the end of most movies.
That's fair. I think it is pretty refreshing that the main character is actually pretty smart, and yeah, you're totally right. I do like I think they did a very good job with the transition of Julia, starting off like maybe kind of passive aggressive towards Larry, but then you start seeing her true colors as she's being manipulated by Frank and is giving him more and more sacrifices.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was kind of cool with what you were saying also. Like, she basically gets unmasked in a literal sense because they peeled her face off.
Yeah.
She was in the bed with her face peeled off.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool. Also, Frank, with his narcissism, they literally tore him apart.
Yeah.
Mm.
So there's no way he can look good after that.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
So, well, anything else we want to say regarding entertainment before we move to realism?
Nope, I think most of my issues were mainly the realism, as usual.
Yeah, like, I think I'm mostly, like, I really like the effects, as I said, but there were some moments I think we agreed that sometimes the flow of blood was a bit too, like, drippy and watery and
yeah,
a little bit exaggerated, but it was quite entertaining though. I quite like they gave a good reason for him having to go to the hospital. That was pretty cool. And he's too nice, Larry. That's his downfall, because he offered to like carry the couch with them, and it led to his injury. But there you go.
Cool. Well, not cool regarding Larry. Poor Larry.
Poor Larry.
But for realism. So before I say my rating, kind of my justification is it's like the whole situation itself isn't that realistic. Like the whole like opening a portal to hell using a puzzle box and essentially like a Rubik's Cube, and that whole situation, obviously that's not like super realistic. And since the movie is so focused around that, it's hard for me to suspend my belief regarding that, since it's such an integral part of the storyline. But I will say that specifically Kirsty, her reactions are very realistic. I think a part of the reason why she's such a sympathetic character is because as a viewer, I feel like her reactions would be my reactions in that same situation. So it's just really easy to connect to her with like Julia and things like that. Even though we do have this progression of her becoming more and more evil, it is a little bit harder to believe that a person like that is quite as, oh my god, I love your alien mug.
I wondered how long it would take you to notice it.
It's not the most observant.
No, I'm not. Yeah, like what episode was it where you like cut your hair, Jess? And I'm just like, wait a minute. Like you had to tell me that you cut your hair, and I'm like, oh shit.
Which movie it was in the middle of, but yeah. I had been over there for a couple of hours.
Yeah. But anyways.
Terrible.
But so my realism is mainly Kirsty that held up the realism a little bit more for me. So I will personally give this a 3. I hate harping on the effects because I feel like the effects themselves are more entertainment. Now, like the actual like lacerations and things like that, that's more in the realism. But I will give this movie props. The fact that it's like, as Frank is regenerating, me and Jess were like, wouldn't he be in like a lot of pain? Because he's essentially just like a skeleton with like little bits of flesh and stuff in the beginning. And then finally, later down the line, he mentioned, oh, my nerves are coming back. I'm starting to feel pain. And then even further later, you see him smoking a cigarette and he mentions, oh, it's nice to taste again. So I definitely give this movie props for adding those types of details, because it really does add to the realism, especially when the viewer is wondering that type of stuff. I mean, we might just be really weird viewers, but I can really appreciate them like adding little details like that don't really matter, but kind of flesh out, pun intended, the lore Genius. Of the realism.
I agree.
We need to get to the meat of it.
Oh no, it's one of those episodes. Well, spill the tea. What would you give it?
I'm gonna have Keith go first on this one.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Okay, I'll go a little bit higher. I mean, it is hard to judge realism wise. I think it's reasonably grounded, like I said, and a lot of the reactions are pretty good. So I'm gonna go about middle of the road. I'll go about 5.5 for realism. I feel there's certain things I think Frank was too naive to sort of cotton on, and obviously, like, I think Julia was quite smart a lot of the time. She obviously brought the guys home during the day and stuff, but obviously there's so much shit going on in that bedroom or wherever that room was in the house, and yeah, you just feel after a certain while he would have cottoned on a bit, and he was just a bit too naive. But I guess part of that was like his infatuation with her, and that's obviously something they played on in the movie. And yeah, there's certain things which can be explained through hubris, as I said, like the whole sort of gimmick of buying the box on like sort of like this wise-looking old guy off a market sort of thing. I feel that's like a cool sort of horror like trope. But yeah, there's certain moments I think in general, like I think Kirsty, who generally is very quite smart and proactive, and you root for her, but like her and her boyfriend, who isn't like the sharpest knife in the drawer sort of thing, he they have a dumb moment where they think they've got out the house and they actually choose that moment to hug, which is really stupid. They should have made that final step outside.
Yeah.
Because once you're outside, you know you're safe for sure. So yeah, that was a little on the naive front. Again, I guess that's sort of like a horror trope. I don't know if this class as realism so much, but it annoyed me a bit how stereotypical those like removal men were. Like just how sort of leery they were, and just sort of how sweaty and stuff, and just they were rude. They were like asking for beer. You know, you should wait to be offered and stuff. So they were kind of like stereotypical. I think there was also a class thing going on with them because, you know, Julia, who normally isn't afraid to like pull it about, she actually like turned her nose up at them. So I sort of feel like she was like the more middle class character looking down at like the working class with that stuff. I think I think that is mostly it. As I said, I think at times with some of the gore scenes, the blood was a bit too exaggerated, and you know they exaggerated the level of like the wound and stuff. But I mean, that stuff still looked pretty good to like watch. And yeah, I think that's mostly. There's a few things that do let it down a little bit with like realism, but I think overall the characters' reactions were pretty solid, and you know, Kirsty is someone we rooted for. So some of it is just like, I guess, typical horror stuff where sometimes they just, for the sake of the movie, they have to like play with the box a bit more or something. Mm-hmm. But Kirsty was quite smart with that. She sort of cottoned on to what she needed to do. I did wonder if like the final sort of bit when she knows what's going on and she goes back to the house, I mean that's sort of putting her in harm's way, and I sort of wondered if she could come up with a better plan, but I guess it's quite tricky because that was part of the deal in a way. Then they wanted Frank, that being the Cenobite. So, but just small stuff like that. Overall, I think it's pretty solid.
Yeah, I didn't think about the classism stuff that you mentioned, but yeah, I think that is a good point.
So this one was kind of difficult on the realism scale for me to judge, just because there are some scenes where the effects themselves are so good and pretty realistic, like the lacerations on Frank's face, quote unquote, when he's wearing Larry's skin. That looked pretty realistic. And there were several scenes like that, but then there's others, like when he first came back to life, where it just looks kind of funny, honestly. Not gonna lie.
It looks like a mummy.
Yes, and when the skin's being stretched and it looks like a completely different texture than it should be. And some scenes the blood actually looks fairly realistic, and other scenes where it's like super watery and very red, like it's not the right color. So they're a little inconsistent with it, I feel like, and I think that's part of my issue. Because if you're going to be really, really good on some scenes, why not do that everywhere? Like through the whole movie.
I mean, it could be limitations with like materials and things like that. Or
it
budget.
Could be, but then just scale back some of it, you know?
That's fair.
I guess, yeah, I think for me it's not like a big issue because it fits in this sort of movie, and I think obviously although it is in some ways like a full-on scary movie, in other ways I think it is meant to be like a little bit of a B movie and quite campy as well. But
most likely, and it is for the most part visually pleasing. It just doesn't, to me, it kind of takes me out of the setting.
Yeah,
but I'm also the one that's like, I need it to be real. So again, just my opinion on that.
Yeah,
I can see her really falling for a guy like Frank, but staying with Larry just because Frank is kind of a free spirit, I guess, where he just goes off and does his own thing. But as soon as she gets the opportunity to get with him again, she takes it. That kind of situation, unfortunately, happens all the time. Realism or not, like, it happens. I did have questions about where she put the bodies, but then thinking about it, that was one of the issues that I had with the effects, is they showed one of those bodies
in the
attic that spilled out maggots all over Kirsty or whatever her name is. And I'm not sure why there were so many maggots coming out of that body. It had only supposedly been like a day or two.
Yeah.
Maybe it had been a week, but it just didn't seem quite right. Like, I feel like it was more of a shock factor kind of thing at that point.
Probably, yeah.
And a gross out factor than actual realism there.
Well, plus, like, a fly would have to be able to be in... I mean, houses typically, like, on a rare chance, will have, like, maybe one or two flies. And the fact that the attic door would have more than likely... Well, I guess they had... the windows were broken open, so that would have given more opportunity for the flies to, like, smell the body and then go over there.
But it just seemed like an excessive amount of maggots.
Yeah. I agree. Especially for the amount of time.
But
also,
I still like this scene. So
yeah.
Even though I accept that complaint.
Also, there would have been some kind of smell of all of this going on.
Yeah.
Dude's oozing all over the floor in the attic. And smells permeate. And he then goes and kills, 3 guys that we know of that they showed?
Yeah.
And whether or not those bodies were, like, juiced.
Ew. How would you describe it like that? Juiced? They're not on the green smoothie diet.
Look at that reaction. That's why I do it. Plus, I mean, what other term am I going to use? They got juiced so he could regenerate. But there were still fleshy bits left.
Yeah.
Which waste of food.
Compose.
That really is a waste of food. I don't know. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. I wasn't sure with some of that stuff because I guess they didn't really show you, so I wasn't really sure how much Julia like cleaned up after Frank and like went to those lengths. So I guess that's possible. I think also some scenes I just got the impression, because it was like a supernatural type scenario, that maybe like there was a logic of its own where maybe you could get around that stuff and they could just like not have that sort of smell in a way. I don't know. Maybe. But speculation.
But we're already setting aside a lot for the Cenobites.
The showdown begins.
I'm not setting that one aside. That one does not get a pass.
Okay.
And even if he got a pass, because technically he was revived magically from blood that fell onto the floor, an excessive amount, I feel, also, of blood that fell from a wound from a nail.
Well, but
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Yeah, I still think it would have been a lot of blood, because I've gotten injuries around that area and it bleeds a lot. It takes a while for it to stop.
Admittedly, yes. I've got a scar on my webbing from scissors going into it.
No.
It's unpleasant and it does bleed a lot. I just feel like it bled an excessive amount in that short amount of time.
You're like, from my real life experience.
Just saying.
No, I agree. That was my first reaction in that scene.
Like, that was a lot. And if he is bleeding that much that quickly, I feel like he has an entirely different problem that would probably need to be dealt with.
I sort of like then they did actually like take him to the hospital.
Yes.
I think in some horror movies that they would be quite dumb and like they would just stay there and they say, "Oh, it's nothing. We'll tend to the wound here."
Yes.
Yeah. No, they did take him to get stitches, and he does have that bandage the entire time. They even show it when Frank takes Larry's skin. They show that bandage on his hand. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, even if we give Frank a pass for being a supernatural regenerating corpse come back to life, I still don't give the other yuppie guys a pass. Just because they were lured in and got a bait and switch.
Okay.
So I also don't feel like the hospital scene was very accurate. Like, there was a nurse just randomly in her room with a TV watching a flower just bloom randomly. And then once she wakes up, I'll go get the doctor. I'm not going to answer any of her questions about why you're in here or are you okay or anything like that. I'm just going to go get the doctor. And then the doctor comes in. Just
the standard of British healthcare in the 80s. That's what I put it down. I think it's even worse today, maybe.
Oh, no.
Ways. I have concerns that... But the doctor comes in and even he doesn't answer, like, any questions. He asks her a couple, but when she's reluctant to answer any of them, like, she doesn't stay whether or not she remembers fully. She just kind of clams up and is like, I don't know you. I don't know what's going on. I don't want to talk. Yeah. Is kind of the reason she gave. And then he leaves. And I feel like in that kind of situation, there likely would have been police involved and probably would have come into the room and asked her some questions about, why she had blood on her and why she was carrying a random box and was unresponsive.
Yeah. Kind of. That sort of scene I can give a pass because, I think you do see that scene in like other movies, like where there is just like a nurse sitting in the room with her. And I think the stuff on the TV that is, I think, meant to be like maybe supernatural or something. I got that impression because later on there's a connection to like the flower, then they like conjure up sort of thing. So I just thought that was like supernatural. Not that it's a big deal, but I didn't really mind that scene too much. I mean, the doctor, they were both douchebags, but maybe they're just not very good at their jobs. Yeah. But it's like she was passed out, and so I can sort of think that maybe at some point the police would have came and spoke to her. But you have to remember she was up pretty fast and she was active, so maybe they didn't have time to get there. Maybe.
I don't know. The whole scene just seemed a little out of place. I feel like they could have done a better job with it. Like the same thing basically could have happened if she had made it back to her own apartment and was just messing with the box there. So it seemed a little forced and unnecessary and didn't really answer anything.
I think they're trying to go for maybe creating a more sense of helplessness. But, I mean, I do agree, though, that they could have put that scene in another area and made it seem a little bit more natural.
Yeah.
Or they could have just dropped it. I mean, it's not that important to the storyline, is it? So
it's really not. Like I said, she could have messed with the box anywhere, and honestly, they could have made it make a little bit more sense if she was just in her own apartment or something like that, where she was messing with it and realized that this can happen anywhere. I'm not safe anywhere.
Yeah.
And then maybe she goes to the police station immediately after, tries to explain it. They don't believe her.
Yeah.
And then she runs straight to the dad's house trying to help him or herself because no one else will.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
So
that's fair.
Like, it could have been done a little bit better.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give it a 3 overall as well.
Hey,
okay.
We're twinsies.
Soul sisters.
Which is rare, honestly, for
not recently for some reason, but
I feel like I'm making you more of a cynic.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like once you've done over 100 of these, oh man, I had a notification go off. I literally turned off the notifications. But anyways, what was I saying? Oh, I was gonna say once you've done like over 100 of these, I feel like you just naturally become more of a cynic. Yes,
you heard nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, did you have a beep boop?
I forgot I had an alarm set.
Oh, see, you getting that at me, and then I get to. Shh, we're professionals.
We aren't usually recording this late.
This is fair.
Anyway. So that's what I give it.
It's scary when I'm the most professional one on the podcast. That's not good.
We're sorry.
Yeah, it's like we're not giving very good impressions of ourselves. We're like,
well, I've seen enough of your recordings to know.
Well, that's good. At least you at least came into it with your eyes wide open.
To know that we're awkward, and despite doing these for like over 2 years, we're still like
you just knew what you were walking into.
Yep. But yeah, overall, I definitely think that it's worth the watch. I would encourage anyone who does watch it to watch it multiple times. Because, I mean, from my experience, from Jessica's experience, it sounds also from Keith's experience. As you keep on watching it, you get a little bit more out of it. It starts to make a little bit more sense. It's a little bit more cohesive. And then you can kind of dive deep into the symbolism and all of that good stuff. But was there anything else anyone else wanted to add about their movie? The movie or their thoughts?
Their movie experience, maybe? Is that what you were going for?
Yeah.
I'll just add, it was a gag. My joke about British healthcare, it was a gag before people start hating on me in the comments.
Yeah, I could DM you and be like, "What have you done?"
They do their best. They're underfunded. So just to get a little bit political, they're underfunded, but they are brilliant. I mean, they might not have been that great in the 80s. I can't say for sure, but
I know medicine.
Shit, I'm digging myself in deep again. Yeah. It was a gag, people.
Jess, anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I've said all I need to on this movie for now. I would definitely say give it a watch and then wait a little bit and then give it another watch. Because it does take time to digest.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, it's not one I watch super often, but I would say, yeah, I'd probably watch it every 2 to 3 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a weird one.
Yeah, there's a lot, like weird. You said, to take on, and you definitely learn more as you watch, but I think, yeah, Pinhead, as he's not officially called in this movie, he doesn't get given that title till part 2, apparently. He's a really great horror villain. I think he's underrated, and the Cenobites, I like how they're all quite distinct as well. Quite different to each other, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, like their voices, their looks.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It's a good cult movie, I think.
Yeah.
I would say.
Definitely. But thank you everyone for joining us today, and please comment on what you guys thought of the movie. And if you'd like to recommend a movie and keep up to date with our content, you can find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and most places that you listen to podcasts. And I do want to throw out thank you so much, Keith, for joining us today, and we will link his contact stuff below if you'd like to see more of his content.
Absolutely. Please, guys, go visit his channel, like, share, subscribe his stuff as well.
Yes.
And thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And if you'd like to support our podcast monetarily, we do have a Teespring available. We also have our affiliate link for Plum Deluxe down below. No pressure. It doesn't change the price if you use our link or anything like that. It just supports the podcast a little bit. We get a small commission from it. And all of those links that we mentioned will be linked down below. And until the next time, guys, stay safe and stay spoopy. Bye.
Bye, guys.